If you do want an unconventional path, like you should pay for that.
When you graduate, there are two paths. There's the path to becoming a multimillionaire. It's the time-tested career track of consulting, finance, and law, but it comes with a ton of sacrifices. Or you can blaze your own unique trail and follow what excites you and makes you come alive. Paul Miller was a consultant at both McKinsey and BCG before he blew it all up to become a writer. But let's look at the math here.
Well, and I've done the math, like 60 to 70 grand until like 65 years old. If I can like figure that out, it probably works.
I left Wall Street too at 35 years old, but let's not tell Paul that my Southern California rent is way more than that. In this episode, we discussed how it's foolish to try to immediately replace your corporate income, how leaning into uncertainty is a superpower, and how constraints can force you to truly live your values. Let's jump in.
The Cliff Notes is like somebody that was raised good at school, on the default path, was good at getting good grades, went into consulting, sort of loved it early on, then slowly lost more and more interest in it, blew up my life in 2017, and have spent this last 7.5 years sort of wandering what I now call the pathless path, trying to step into uncertainty and like find the things I really care about and trying to build a life around that. I actually want to take us back. We have a lot of things in common, but one thing that I realized in reading your book is that we were both grotesquely skinny kids. You like that part? I did like that part, and I'd love for you to just play back that moment that I'm referring to of your traumatic moment of childhood. I was pretty good at like making fun of myself. Maybe you had a similar like class clown type energy, but yeah, it was always super tiny. And I was one of the shortest people in my class in high school, and it became more pronounced through high school. It was like I was like not hitting puberty, and I was increasingly becoming more aware of this fact. Like, one, I was not that interested in women for obvious reasons that are linked with that. Two, everyone was just skyrocketing around me. And I just became like self-conscious of it. I was super tiny and like would kind of make fun of it with my friends. My friends were like, all right, we're going to throw you 100-pound party once you hit 100 pounds. And really, I started college. I was like slightly over 100 pounds. I was still very tiny and very self-conscious of this. And the reason I talked about this in the book is that I sort of buried some of the uncomfortable emotions with that. And the easiest way for me to bury them was to achieve in the world. And there's this moment I talk about in the book where I'm asking my prom date to the prom, and like he's like grilling me, what are you going to do with my daughter? What are your intentions? And I start talking about my full scholarship, and suddenly he like softens. It's like, oh, okay. All right. Like, yeah, you can be in the mix with my daughter. And yeah, like writing this book made it very clear that was a big shift in me realizing there was this formula. I decoded something about the world where if you succeed, people will like you, people love you, people will embrace you. And I think I really like internalized that as the primary mode of life for the next several years. And I did hit puberty. I grew a lot. I actually became one of the tallest people in my class. And I did become interested in women, but I was terrified of actually pursuing women early in college. And I think I know now because it was just emotional avoidance. I'm not sure if you've had Joe Hudson on the pod, but
yeah, we have.
I think it's a lot of like what he talks about. I was scared to feel the feelings of inadequacy, not feeling good enough. So I just stayed in my lane and just like kept achieving, not really dating, trying to pursue success and like hoping that would solve it. And we had all these, you probably grew up with similar ideas like, if you make a lot of money, you will attract women and be loved by the world, right? Yeah. And so the problem is that actually works.
Hey, quick time out. If you're watching this video, you're probably someone who thinks deeply and intentionally about your career, about your life, and about your relationships. But sometimes you might find yourself in a place feeling stuck, unmotivated, or just rudderless. If that's you, we have a coaching program for people looking to make a bold pivot and rediscover their aliveness. Just check out radreads.co/coaching. Now back to the video.
The deeper problem behind that is you've never dealt with your shit.
Yeah.
And so I think this is a big thing I tried to pull out in this book, and sort of like, work is the Trojan horse of basically a path to dealing with your emotions. It's a personal growth journey. Oh man, there's so much there. My own story. So I was a little bit more, I think I got to college and I weighed 128 pounds. And you're taller than me. I'm 5'10". You're probably 6'1". I was 5'10" when I started college, around 110 pounds. And I remember I was still wearing like baggy clothes. I wear bigger shirts then than I do now. I was wearing like a large, I bought these Ralph Lauren polos because like I was like, oh shit, I need to be cool. Like other people are wearing these. And yeah, they were just like hanging off my body. Yeah. I think that when I hear similar things where I was attracted to women, but they weren't attracted back to me in high school. I was like permanently friend zoned. And so I was like, okay, what's my plan? I think, you know, when the weight gaining story for me was kind of a similar-ish narrative, was like very high agency, which is if there's something you don't like, for me personally, it's like, if there's something you don't like about your situation, change it, right? And I think that probably arises from an immigrant mindset in some regards, of kind of like having to will your way into assimilation and financial security and all the crazy shit that my parents did, crazy impressive shit. And so it was like, I don't like the way my body looks, and so I'm going to change it. And then I like took creatine. I lifted 2.5 hours a day. I had this, I don't think I ever told this story, but it was right around when the Jersey Shore TV show came out on MTV, and they were all about their calves. So that they like that, it wasn't even about biceps then, it was about calves. And I have like chicken fucking legs. And so I took this piece of wood and I stacked it on like two other little pieces of wood to create, something so you could get that the ankle, the calf extension on a calf raise. Like you could go below horizontal. And I just would do like thousands of calf raises every day in hope of getting bigger calves. And so I just think back on these stories of agency and willing your way, which I do think, to your point about Joe Hudson, for me, it was emotional avoidance. Like, I don't want to know what it feels like to feel skinny and unattractive. So let me channel all of that misplaced sadness and shame into like something quote unquote positive. I think like for many years, I didn't realize the side effects, but that was the plan. Yeah, I think this stuff is really tricky to talk about. Like one of the first titles of this book was Losing My Edge. And I wanted to talk about the process of what it's like to lose your edge. And when I talk about an edge, I talk about like basically that formula I internalized. Okay, do impressive achievements and like everything will figure itself out. And you can sustain that by avoiding figuring out what you really want. And that actually can be super beneficial early in your life, because I think this is something you talk about too. Like sometimes like when the Gen Z people are like, I dropped out of college and like, I'm just going for it. I'm like, holy shit. Like that is way beyond my fear. Like I do think it, like some of these corporate and career paths are very beneficial, especially early in life. And like you're learning a ton, you're around people that are excited and motivated. The challenge is the off ramps. Yeah. Because in my 20s, I did like start achieving things and I was doing impressive things, and like women did like that. But one major problem, I didn't actually want what they were attracted to. Right? And so like I remember going on all these dates in my final job in New York in my early 30s, and like I had a hard time admitting I really did want like to be married and have a family. It was so important to me. And I kept attracting these people that like I'm just like I have no interest in the life they want. I'd be like, wouldn't it be cool to like blow up our lives and travel the world for a year? And they're like, no. Like I could like see them instantly lose interest in me. So I didn't actually start attracting the people I really connected with until after I quit my job and became poor, which sort of like undermined a lot of my scripts. So I want to go back to this question of like, does work have to suck? Because you talk about these scripts, and we were actually just in a Zoom call together when you put up, you're like, what is work? So if you're listening or watching, what is work? How would you define it? And, even as someone who's been on an atypical path for a decade now, there's still like, I think I put it as like, it's how you support your family. That was one of my answers. It's, I think I had a more, a more generous answer, which was it's expressing your gifts. It's sharing your gifts with the world. But even as I wrote that out, I'm like, do I fully like full-throated, full-hearted believe that? And so you had this career as a consultant. You blew it all up. I'm always in awe. Like you blew it. Like I feel like you blew it up to the what they call it, like the bolts in like when you tear down a house, like the primary bolts, so to speak. Yeah. And you've been on this 7-year journey, I guess. Like, tell us about what are you in search of? Yeah. So the answer is, does work have to suck? Deep down, I believed that until I quit my job. And it wasn't like work has to be painful or terrible. It was like work is this thing in adulthood that all the adults do. You're going to have to do it, and there's no escape. And so within that story, I would claw at the edges of work for freedom. I would leave early on Fridays. I prided myself on being the guy that is like, I'm picking up and walking out at 3. I don't care what people think about me. I took all my vacation days. I worked remotely when I felt like it and didn't inform people. I thought I had mastered the game. But I was scared to like really face the fact that the longer I stayed in that consulting path, I was now in a path where I didn't actually enjoy or care about the work anymore. I'd gotten really good at it. I could kind of do it in my sleep. I wasn't challenged. And I think I was ignoring like who I really was. I was playing the outer game and ignoring some of the things I actually loved early on that path, which was like intense curiosity. I loved learning. I loved helping other people. I had this moment a couple of years before I quit my job where I was helping somebody in the office. They didn't give her training because like there was some weird mishap with like her manager left the company, and she had like no team, no manager, and like no training. And she's like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm like, all right, I'm going to like meet with you 2 hours a day. I'm just going to like train you. This will be fun. I love this. And like one of my managers is like, like this isn't going to help you. And I knew that, but like somebody's so blatantly going out of their way to tell me, it was like, oh, this is actually like what I enjoy and like doing. Like, how do I make this work? And for the next year and a half, I was like, all right, I'm going to shift into training and development. Gonna like try and make it work.
This is after consulting.
This was still in consulting. I just kept going from different consulting job, and like
Got it.
I had 4 different firms I worked at. But when I quit, slowly my days started to fill more and more with things I liked doing. And so for the first 16 months, I still believe work had to suck. But then I find myself sitting there in Taiwan. I literally am not looking for work. I'm living on $800 a month. My bank account is shrinking. But man, I am having the time of my life. I'm listening to podcasts. I'm waking up every morning and writing. I'm feeling good about myself. I'm starting to like loosen some of my anger at the corporate world. And I was like, what if I just spend my life like this?
Yeah.
That was really the question. And at that time, I was rejecting everything. So you've mentioned on our last podcast of like, how's Paul doing this? Is he just naive? Like, he's going to have to make money eventually. But that was the question that was most interesting to me. I was like, screw it. I'm just going to see if I can aim at a life where I do the opposite of what my brain is telling me to do.
And your brain's saying, make money and like do something
my brain still
productive.
says that.
Yeah.
For the last 3 months, like I did have a huge boost from like book sales. But that's declined rapidly. So for the last 3 months, my spend is now above my income. And that doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
But not
for context for our listeners, that Paul also has an 18-month-old daughter and a wife who's also an entrepreneur.
Yeah. And she's not making any money, and I'm spending 2 or 3 days a week watching my daughter so she can write her book. And so it's scary, but what would feel worse to me is not continuing to explore this edge.
Yeah.
So it's actually somewhat easy, and I have 7.5 years of experience of like not going broke and like sort of being okay. I'm not like rapidly increasing wealth. It's declining a bit now.
No.
And I'm in my like what someone might call my prime earning years, but like this is totally fine because I know at the end of my life, like I'm probably not going to regret spending time with my daughter, probably not going to regret writing a book. And I'm probably not going to regret this conversation either. So it's like, I'm really just trying to live out like how I actually want to live and take that to its extreme.
Yeah. And what strikes me, I mean, this is really hard to explain to people who haven't been on this path. So you and I are very kind of kindred in that regard. But I feel like there's almost two questions here, and they're not like perfectly juxtaposed against one another. One is like what do you figure out what to do question?
Yeah.
Right. And you had mentioned you're in Taiwan, you're listening to podcasts, you're writing, you're probably doing a handful of internet projects, leisure, curiosity, right? I think it's almost hard to describe like an average day in that sense. And then there's this like the second piece, which I know many of our listeners are gonna like really anchor to, is if I could figure that out, how do I make money doing it, right? And make it sustainable. Because if someone here is like, yeah, I want to listen to podcasts, I want to write, I want to creatively meander, they're gonna be like, yeah, me too. I want to do that too, but guess what? You have a kid, you have healthcare, and so on. And so I guess my question for you, my first question is like this meandering phase, because I do think it's like, how does someone in the system, in the work system, tap into that, like, I'm calling it meandering phase?
Yeah. I think it like the replace your income before you leap, or leap to a similar or higher income, I think is a terrible place to start, right? And I think something I try to convey in both my books is that if you do want an unconventional path, like you should pay for that.
Yeah.
Like you should, like, because there might actually be things you are willing to pay for. So like, I mean, your listeners are comfortable hearing about money. Like, I have this chart where like it shows like if I just basically just stayed on my path, I've probably left over $1 million on the table over the last 7.5 years. And yeah, that is like hard to look at. Like when I look back, it's like, would I have made the same decision? It's like, probably, but it would have been like, damn. Right? But in return for that, I am getting compensated in all these magnificent things, right? And so that meandering phase helped me reprice a lot of those things. So what I've found is that like a planned sabbatical is actually the most efficient way to test this meandering phase. I think for me, it worked really well just to like blow it up without a plan. And like, I didn't have any income coming in for like 4 or 5 months. I think what I realized about myself is I sort of like running into the fire. And I was missing that sense of adventure in my life on such a planned, predictable path. So you got to figure out like where you are on that spectrum of like how much fire you want. But a planned sabbatical, they're much more common now. They're much like cooler to talk about. 3 months. In those 3 months, I guarantee you, if you let the journey come to you, you will find things you are called to do. Like literally with like non-work time, people start to just remember stuff about themselves. Oh, I used to like surfing. Oh, I used to play basketball for fun. Oh, why am I suddenly writing? Like everyone that takes their sabbaticals starts writing. I don't know why. Maybe it's writers take sabbaticals, or people just like creating things, I think. So you will find things to do. Now, my writing has not paid the bills. For 5 years, I made less than $1,000 from writing. And I was spending the majority of my time doing writing and writing-related activities. And so I was very pragmatic about how to make money. I call this the puzzle of good work.
Hello.
I slowly started shifting away from like consulting projects, which still would pay me far better than any of the work I do, toward like what I call my good enough work. And this is work that like still lets me express some of the things that make me me. But honestly, if you gifted me $1 million, I would stop doing them tomorrow.
So lay that out. So you have your good work, your good enough work.
Yeah, if you gifted me $1 million, I would continue to write tomorrow. Wouldn't have any
So writing
change.
is your good work, which it's a hierarchy, so to speak, right?
It's something I have to do. And my whole path has become around like prioritizing that connection with that kind of work above everything else, right? It's, okay, will I step away for a few months and do a couple like workshops and trainings and work that like I'd skip if I had more money? Yes, because it will then buy me time and freedom and mental space to not worry about money, even if the money's declining a little, to do the work that really lights me up. And I have 7.5 years of evidence now. When I look back on my first book, I still like smile. It's like so delightful to write it. And I think you're experiencing that a little bit now, right? With like some of your writing.
No, absolutely. And that's why I've been writing for 10 years. It's like I never enter the weekend like this is a chore. I'm like, this is cool. I get to try this out. But I guess so you have good work and you have good enough work. I'm just trying to like crystallize it for our listeners. Like, let's say I didn't like writing. Could my good work be a hobby? Could it be like surfing or music production?
I honestly think surfing is part of your good work. When I think of you, it's like surfing, writing, supporting people on bold leaps. It's like, that's sort of like, and I decline like good work is not like the thing you do for a paycheck. Good work is the thing that gives you life. Right.
That's a great definition. Yeah. And I think you're spot on. Like I love being outdoors. Like I walk for 30 minutes a day just to be outside.
And so it's this constant puzzle, because it's like, okay, if I'm not having enough of these kind of conversations with people curious about the ideas, like I need some of that in my life. That is a core part of my good work. And those supporting activities, it's not really a ranking, but they're necessary. But if it's a complete competition between like my podcast and my writing, like my writing's gonna outcompete it. Because if somebody a good question is like, if somebody came to you and like said like, hey, I'm gonna take surfing from you, you're like, all right, let's fight. I'll fight you. Or like your writing, you might feel like that. But if somebody was like, hey, I'm gonna fight you for your newsletter, but you can still keep your book writing, I'd probably keep the book writing. I think that's sort of where my energy is now. But like the newsletter or my podcast or some other stuff I do, it's like, you could take it as long as I still have this other stuff. Yeah. And one thing I was thinking when I was reading your book that you had this window, because even in this kind of good enough work, which I guess is like, it's things that are like adjacent to your good work, but income producing. And so I would say for me, it's like group coaching. Yeah, like for sure. I really like group coaching, but if I won the lottery, like I do group coaching in service of writing, right? And like creative expression. Yeah. And if you had to, if you're going like all in on this book, and you have like 3 months to go and it's like, okay, I really need this time. You might be like, okay, I'm going to shut down the coaching for a bit and really just sink into the book. So it's really a way of like figuring out what's right for your season of life. And this constantly shifts. Like right after I moved to the US, I took a consulting project. Like it just like for our friend Andrew Barry, he has a consulting firm and it was for like a corporate client. And I'm in these calls doing interviews with like senior executives in suits. They're in their mid 50s. And like one guy's trying to like talk me down and like one up me and being like, consultants are stupid. Why are you even here? And I'm just like, like it's right back where I was. And like, that is my bad work. But at the same time, I needed the money.
Sometimes you need to do it.
I was scared and it helped me. It also helped me remind me to recommit to my path. And that was right after I launched my book. And after that project, I was like, screw this. I'm just going more ham on my book. Yeah. And I got bolder with my podcast. I started promoting it more. I started asking people for help more. And it helped me recommit and remind me what it's all about. And this journey is constantly like that. It's like, I'm sure you've had phases of like, okay, what do I really care about? Yeah. I think that this point about doing consulting, and I love that you just bring it up in the book, is because you said this earlier, but this is a huge mistake people make when they leave a traditional path, is that they try to replace their income. It's like, no, there's a premium, like you probably were good at your job. So there's just like a halo, whether it's like the Goldman Sachs halo or the McKinsey halo or the Yale halo or some like halo that just like gave you 10, 20, 30% more compensation. You can't just like recreate that halo on your own. The second thing is that, once you hang a shingle, you're also the head of ops, you're also the head of marketing, you're also the head of customer service, right? And like 1, 2, 3 calls, that you're looking at like half of your day to support an activity that you don't even really love. But at the same time, and I think this is what I love that you're putting it out this way, it's like you need to have the versatility to be like, right now, my scarcity is like really kicking. It's on overdrive. And I'm like acting like a shithead husband because I'm just worried about money all the time. I'm going to suck it up, do this hedge fund consulting gig, right? Get the bag, secure the bag. And then, but the problem is like that should be the escape hatch, like the break in case of emergency, not like step 2. Yeah. And I haven't done another one of those for 3 years. I haven't done any hedge fund consulting I can't do it. It's so painful, but it's lucrative as hell. Right. And so when I talk to Angie about our life, it's like, hey, just so you know, like I would go take a job. Like she actually worries about money less than me. So like she doesn't even need reassurance. But it's like, I sort of lay out my plan. It's like, okay, here's like the extreme emergency. I can go do this. And like, bless her though. Like, she's like, I don't want you to have to go do that. We'll do anything to avoid you having a job again. Because she sees all the benefits of like me feeling connected and excited and being passionate and waking up with enthusiasm for my life. But another thing worth mentioning, I think like when people like, I think from afar, it might look like I'm just like, I'm going to flow. On the other side of that, I'm very deliberate on the constraints I give myself, the mental models I take for these things. And so there's probably another book I want to write around like some of these mental models. But when I moved abroad and started enjoying what I was doing, I was now dating someone living in another country, and I had no freelance, like remote income. One of the constraints I gave myself is like, okay, I want to be able to live with her wherever she is. And so 2018, I just decided I will not take work where I have to physically be anywhere. Okay. And so everything I did was designed for remote first. And so some of the trainings and workshops I started to experiment with for like very small dollars at the beginning, I was doing them remotely. So I actually got 3 years of reps before the entire world started working remotely. And like now remote training is a thing. Yeah. So I sort of lucked out because I gave myself their constraint and I got actually pretty good at doing that. Yeah. Another thing was like, okay, I am always going to be willing to like create digital products, info products, things like that, where I can make money, not selling my time. Right. So no in person and no selling my time. So I've tried to avoid that as much as possible. And I've taken like a month at a time at multiple points to like create courses, create products, try stuff. Most of my stuff has failed. But like I keep like doing those experiments, and especially a ton at the beginning. I have a freelance consulting course. I basically just give it away for free inside my community now. But like I could never find like product market fit. But I took like a month and a half to build that. And actually it was very fun for me. It was like good enough work, like creating a course and like synthesizing ideas. I love that. But ultimately when it was done, I didn't have enough energy to like go all in and create a business around it. So it's like one of the like probably like 2-3 of those like 25 like small bets in the constraint of no time for money and has to be remote work friendly, have worked out. Yeah. And I think like people just don't realize like when you give yourself constraints around the life you actually want to live, you will figure something out eventually.
Yeah. Yeah. That reminds me, I was interviewing another writer, first-time author, Carrie's son, who wrote a book called Private Equity. And she always kind of liked writing, but she did same MIT, Fidelity, Wharton MBA, dropped out, and then was an assistant at this huge hedge fund in service of writing, but that job was too confusing, too demanding. And she quits. And she basically did, this is great, you would appreciate this. She did the math on 10,000 hours. And I forget exactly what she said, but I think it's like 20 months, 8 hours a day, something like that. And she wrote for 8 hours a day for 20 consecutive months.
That's great.
And she got it published, and she published a book with Penguin.
And so it just 8 hours a day. That's crazy. I know.
I do too, and I can't even like 2.
I have like 3
my max. But I think that I think people look at us and they're like, oh, these guys just, they surf and they like walk the streets of Taiwan and like listen to podcasts. It's like, yeah, you also write 3 hours. I think that's what you said, every day, and it's sacred. And so that consistency also pays off, but it also like it takes a while for it to show up.
Yeah, and this is a hard thing too, because basically with writing, I still feel like I'm very early in my journey of becoming a better writer. Like I think my writing is like the best it's ever been, but like then I read other stuff and I'm like, man, I have decades to go. This is
like
such
we were reading that Anne Lamont piece. It's like that's like watching Steph Curry play basketball.
She's so good. Yeah, her book like on writing is just so delightfully beautiful. Or on the writing life. I care about it though. Like I really care about this, and so it's easy to commit to that long game. I think early on I sort of had this devastating moment where it's like, okay, I am going to commit to this path. I'm also not very good at it right now. It's going to take a long time. This is also a field where it's very hard to make money. I'm like in my head, like mentally, I was like, I'm probably never gonna be like well off. Still, I'm probably like the poorest student in my business school graduating class. Um, and I like, this is the confusing thing. Like, I miss the like guaranteed money and success and like people being impressed with me. I do miss that.
Yeah.
It would be nice, but I like this path more. What do you do when like you know, one of your peers from your business school class, and you know, someone sends you a text or an email and it's like, you know, Jane Crawford just sold her company to, you know, Nestle for $1 billion, because, you know, something like some version of that has happened. Like, how do you talk yourself, like, how do you talk to yourself after you see something like that where it's a peer that has like a financial windfall? I think early on it made me somewhat uncomfortable. Like, so I was always uncomfortable and excited for them at the same time. I've always been someone that like loves rooting for people. I think now it's much more pure, like, actually, like, I'm very happy for them. Like, that's awesome. I think because I've realized for a lot of those people, like, that is their good work. Like, some people's good work is being a strategy consultant.
Yeah.
And like, they're really good at it. And the only way you make it to like partner at a consulting firm is if you love and care about the work. And like, this is something people really miss when they're young.
Yeah.
Is that if you don't care about your work, the people that do care, it's going to be easier for them to work harder.
Yeah.
Right. And this is something I was trying to pull out in my part about Jensen Huang. Like, people are like gravitate to him talking about the pain and the struggle. But like, there's many other interviews where he talks about like, this is my life's work. This is my passion. This feels light. This feels so good. I love doing this. Like, you can't actually compete with Jensen Huang when he loves his life and his work. Right? You can't grind your way to the top and stay there. Like, you will burn out, you'll have a midlife crisis, or you'll have some sort of health crisis after you retire. Totally. And I think that's something that, you know, I've had my own kind of machinations of it where, you know, I wanted this internet thing to be another source of wealth, right? I almost kind of wanted to swap out the Wall Street game for the internet game. And I think I got really lucky, you know, a blessing and a disguised as a curse, or where when COVID shut down all my COVID ending crushed my productivity business, my online business. And then I was like, you know what? I didn't even fucking want to own the success. You know, that was the thing. It's like, I didn't want to own the successful version of that. And now I shit you not, like, people ask me like, oh, okay, you've been writing RadReads, like an essay, 500 words to 2,000 words for, I think it's been like 400 consecutive weeks. And it's like, it still feels like I'm starting today. Yeah.
Like, it doesn't feel like a 10-year slog, you know? Exactly. And I wonder, like, I mean, you mentioned in this other interview that a big part, let me retract, you know, there's this quote with, by Keynes, it says, markets can stay irrational longer than investors can stay solvent.
Oh yeah.
And I like appropriate that quote. So basically what the quote is saying is, usually it's like, if you borrow money or you're in a bad trade and you need cash, the market can just move against you for longer, and you're going to need the cash. You're going to make a bad decision because you're on the verge of going bankrupt. I think about that often as this kind of solo, kind of unconventional path, is that people, like, markets being irrational is like people telling you you're crazy, or the world being against you. Like, you don't fit into this box. And I always said, it's like, if I could stay emotionally solvent to withstand that, and kind of to get to the other side of it, whatever that is, like in the markets analogy, it's like when markets start eventually going back up. So here it's like when the world either accepts you for who you are or stops caring. I don't know exactly how the metaphor plays out. And I tell you now, like, I have these moments, Paul, when I'm like, should I go do this?
Should I go do this? And usually my answer is like, Kate, whatever will deepen your self-awareness is the thing you should go do now. So if I'm like, should I go write a chapter in my book or should I go make a YouTube video? Usually I either end up meditating. If I'm listening to my own advice, I end up meditating or reading a spiritual sacred text or listening to some music.
Yeah.
And that is the thing that keeps me emotionally solvent. And I think it's why I've been doing it for 10 years.
Well, yeah, I think you have a similar sort of anchor as me, which is I would call it connection. Like for me, it's all about connection to myself, something deeper, whatever that might be for you, God, the sacred, spiritual, and others. Right. And for me, writing and the work has been a portal to that state for me.
Yeah.
And so early on, I had this realization of like, I'm doing my newsletter and it's like, I could probably do this for the rest of my life. And there's this deep sense of knowing that I had never experienced before. Mm-hmm. And this leads to a really interesting thing, which is hard to understand from the outside. But I have no idea where I'm going to live in 3 months. I have no idea what the main money source is next year or the year after. I don't really have a plan. Me and my wife are both okay with that. But I feel more stable than I've ever felt in my life.
That is wild. And I for our listeners who haven't, he also has an 18-month-old.
I think you said that already before. But yeah.
But I need to reinforce it at that point. It's like, I think that's where I'm like, you're like, you operate on a different level. I couldn't even do that. It's like, that's a level of comfort with uncertainty that is super like LeBron James level.
Well, we have options, and we also trust ourselves to like family and our daughter's safety and her sense of connection is probably the most important thing. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of like knowing like, okay, we're not gonna go full like nomadic and go to a new location every 2 weeks. That would be probably way too much chaos. Yeah. But like, could we do something where we travel and move slower and involve Angie's parents? Like, that seems reasonable and like not that crazy for us. Yeah. But I think this has been the whole game for me, is this practicing connection with myself and trust in myself and the universe. And it buys you a lot, I think.
Yeah. Were you always this comfortable with uncertainty?
I think I've always been somebody that loves the unknown, starting new paths, starting new things. And only after quitting that job did I become aligned with that in a more natural way. So I think I've deepened into that. But before I quit my job, I didn't know how to be comfortable with the uncertainty.
Yeah.
So whenever I wanted to escape a job or like even just proactively go after new things in a positive way, like I would never quit a job before I had another job. Right. So I was always locked in a plan, a path. Right. I was always orchestrating my next move. And it was like, really, when I quit, I was like, what if I literally just do the opposite of everything I was doing before? And I found that like, basically I had been living the bizarro life I was meant to be living.
Yeah. Wow. And so if someone asks you like, how do I practice being comfortable in uncertainty, how do you answer them?
Yeah. So I've done these practices and exercises with people. Basically pick a work day, because most people work during work days, especially Americans. Work day, middle of the afternoon, block off 2 hours and go for a wander. So like minimum effective dose is a 2-hour wander. And by a wander, I mean, you have no destination. You don't know where you'll end up. Maybe you don't even end up at home in 2 hours. Take a Lyft or whatever. But you're walking and you're just trying to listen to your body where it's telling you to go. Take a turn, do the opposite turn you usually take the long way. Maybe you're on a bike, but just wander and just keep seeing where you end up. And then also just notice the feelings that come up, right? Yeah. So you're just practicing your own intuition and going against what your head says, right? Because we get in these like, we get locked into these routes. Say you're commuting to a job. You take the same route every day, and you know exactly when to put your blinker on to go over to the next path so that you hit the light at the exact right time. What if you just took a completely random turn tomorrow?
Yeah.
And drove out of your way for 5 minutes and then just see how that feels.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
The other thing is to do an activity from childhood. So just go do that in the afternoon. Like for me, playing basketball is a way to connect with my inner child.
Yeah. Yeah.
And other things like that.
Yeah. You know, I don't think you and I have spoken about this, but this came up I've been doing this therapy coaching modality called internal family systems.
Yeah.
It goes by
I think
IFS.
we've talked about it a little.
We've talked a bit about it in person. I've made a few videos about it, but it's this, for me, it's like very clear, this tension with like uncertainty versus certainty. Is that basically IFS, it's a little bit like inside out. You have these little parts inside you and they're in conflict with one another, and the conflict causes you stress and sadness. And as you reconcile them, you kind of connect to this bigger sense of self. But I have these two parts that are, one is extremely dominating. It is like a hardcore, we call him the CEO. He's so organized. He really like shames you into doing things. He's very like inner critic, all that stuff. And then there's this other guy who we call him, literally with my therapist, we call him Pharrell, like Pharrell, the music producer with the big hat. His son's name is Rocket. You know, it's like, it's polymath creative and, you know, fashion director of Louis Vuitton, amongst many other things. And so Pharrell and the CEO, they're always in conflict with one another, because Pharrell is just like, yo, get off my case. He's like, I know how to do this. I know how to drive this ship that's called Khe. Yeah. And the CEO just doesn't trust him. He's like, you're going to get us in trouble. We're going to lose all our money. Like, people are going to make fun of us. And it's just so funny to watch them interact. Even as I started the process of writing a book, immediately the CEO came out. He's like, 2 hours every day. November, step it up to 3 hours. It was like a rule. And like, and I got like scared of, I'm like, what? But I have something to do next Friday. It's like, no, you must keep the streak going. Like, you know, and I think that in the past, I liked that sense of control. And I'd be like, I need someone to whip me into shape to like keep the ship going. Now though, I think I'm not there yet, but I know like personally one of my breakthroughs is to just like, it's not, and the whole thing about internal family systems is you don't banish a person, right, but you just like, you give them their unmet needs.
Yeah.
Right. And
yeah,
that's a whole other conversation, but it's just, it's so for me, that tension between like planning and certainty, because I know like that Pharrell voice, like I wouldn't have left Wall Street if I didn't have that voice in me, because he's the one that's like, you got to get out of this place.
So at the beginning of this year, I had this desire to like escape, not escape like my family, but like escape my current like setup. I had been tinkering on a book for like an entire year. A lot of it like randomly while my daughter was her first year of life, and like I just didn't feel connected to the work, and I was really like stressed about this. I was like forcing this other book called Experiments in Living. It was like going to be like a how-to playbook for the Pathless path, and like really struggling with it. Never found a flow. Also the question of like, where are we going to live? Also knew that like my income would start rising, because like books don't just go like this. They're not startups and growth companies. They pop and then they shrink. And yeah, I had all these questions, and I got really nervous about money too at the beginning of the year. I did a couple workshops. I got really lucky with like a couple projects. And then I actually was on a trip visiting our friend Johnny Miller in Boulder, and getting the first break from my daughter. I had not taken any solo time. I was there for like 3 days. I felt really guilty about leaving my daughter. But I started to like reconnect. I started to like remind myself what this journey is all about. Okay, why am I doing this? I love writing. I started talking with Johnny about ideas. Like suddenly I'm like exploding again. I'm coming alive, and I'm like telling him about like why it matters to me so much. And I'm like, I just need to write about my connection to work. And as I committed to the work, my podcast sort of drifted away. I paused that. I stopped meetings. I started committing to this 3-day-a-week writing rhythm. And it really like washed over my life. But until then, like I'd been struggling, I'd been trying stuff, but I was trying to do it from that same CEO. Like I would call mine like the strategy consultant.
Yeah.
Like, how do I tactically solve this? How do I tactically produce another book? But it wasn't until I then softened again into that path. And I think creative work, like it demands this softening. If you do not release yourself into the path, you produce work that people notice doesn't have resonance.
Yeah. Especially with writing, the resonance is such a good, it's like you said, good energy to it, right?
And so it's been really interesting to notice just myself. I've found that state again. I've found that let me go with the flow and not worry state again. All while my like income dropping. And it's been fascinating to like see through the process of writing about my relationship with work that it was actually true what I was saying. And so if the book takes off, and I don't know, some books work, some don't. If it works, it's because what I wrote is like true in its deepest sense.
Yeah.
In my soul, it is true. It's been really cool. And like, we have no plan, and that like, I'm more at peace than I've ever been in my path.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
That's amazing.
By the way, I just also want to say, like, I really notice a big shift in you over the past year. Like, I can really feel that. You seem, and just like you send me some of your writing, it's like, wow. Like, just listeners, wait till you read this stuff. Like, you're channeling something really powerful and deep. And like, this is what I'm talking about. Like, this is the stuff. Like, you're going to help so many people.
Oh, thank you, man. That's nice of you to say and to see it like that. And yeah, it's true. I think there was like a surrender that I needed to go through. Like, I think for me, and this is where you've helped me so much, is that like I got so attached to this like published versus self-published thing, which is like the internet's version of buy versus rent. And it was like so debilitating because and it was not, I mean, I definitely was more in the traditional published camp, like the status of it. But then I'm like, I just want to write. And so for listeners, I've been writing 2 hours a day for probably like 2 to 3 months now, 2 months. I've probably written like 20,000, 25,000 words.
Yeah.
A lot of it's bad. A lot of it's kind of disjointed, but there are some like really good threads that are emerging. And honestly, I'm talking to a few agents, but I'm like, it's more just like, just so you know, this is what I'm working on. And it's not like someone said, you should write strength to strength for millennials, or, like the male version of X.
Than that.
Yeah, it's like a book on helping men connect with their feelings. It's like, it's probably, I mean, they know me well enough to know that like a book will encompass those as themes. But it was that like, I was like, I was pushing against that, like, yeah, you have to do it this way. And now it's just like, I've really tapped into that. Like, I'm proud of
this. Like even the fragments that I've sent you, I'm like, I'm proud. Like this is good stuff. And however it comes out, like I'm good. Yeah, and I think this is often a choice you must face with your good work is how much do you want to protect it? And I think the path you're taking is the right path, because the path you're taking right now, you will actually be able to succeed more on either path. It doesn't matter if you self-publish or traditionally publish. Traditional publishers are great at what they do. They'll blast your book to more people. But like the path to writing the best book for you is not to write the X for Y.
Yeah.
It's to write the book only you can write.
Totally.
Yeah. No, and I think it leads a last wrapping thought on this is it leads to this question that you ask in the book that I love is, what is it you want?
Yeah.
Right? It's such a simple question. And there's so many really smart and driven people that A, have never thought about it. B, once they think about it, it's too disorienting. And so they kind of run from it. But like, yeah, I'd love to, like, how does that question show up for you and in your experience? Yeah. And so this is where like, it is easier for me because I don't want the material possessions that other people want. Like I genuinely am not moved by like owning a house or like a lot of nice things. Like they do very little for me. But I do know what I want. I want time freedom. I want time with my family. And also like as I've gotten a better relationship with the work, I do want to do bold creative things.
Yeah.
And I want to look back on my life and look back and say like, I did those things on my terms in a way I really feel good about. And so through that lens, for me, it's very easy to self-publish and not worry about big launches or selling the most copies because like I'm actually just setting myself up to succeed.
Yeah.
And do I want my books to sell a lot of copies? I've actually gotten more comfortable with saying like, hell yeah, like if you want to help me get rich, like buy and promote my books like crazy. Because it feels good. And I did do them on my own terms. But ultimately, when I look back at my life, I don't think it will matter how many copies I sold.
Yeah.
Even when I think back on my first book, I think about the 14 months writing it.
Yeah.
And man, I still just like dream of those days in the mountainside in Taiwan, like writing the book. They were so delightful. Like it was totally worth it. And when I compare it to like year 4 of consulting, churning slides, like it's all just a blur. Like I literally have no memory of it.
Yeah. Wow.
Do you remember that spreadsheet you were making in 2012? No, I
agree, and it's like
maybe there's like one kick-ass model you remember.
I did find that this is actually going to go in the book, but I made a 7-page presentation about myself to get promoted, and I found it on my Dropbox.
So cool.
It's so fucking badass.
But I bet that is actually good evidence that like you had more fun in the creation mode than actually trying to get the promotion.
Totally,
it's probably an early clip.
Totally. But I love what you said, and maybe we'll wrap with that. It's like you want time freedom, which like, look, time freedom is a hard thing to get, but it's not impossible.
You're right.
You want to spend time with your family, which is downstream or upstream from time freedom, and you want to do bold creative projects. Like that's like a very simple, beautiful, complete like trifecta of life that I think a lot of people overcomplicate.
Well, and I've done the math. That like if I can make 60 to 70 a year, I can probably figure it out until I pass away.
Yeah.
Like 60 to 70 grand until like 65 years old. If I can like figure that out, it probably works. And I probably still have some money left at the end.
Yeah. Wow. So that is, you're proving Kahneman, right? 75K.
Yeah, maybe. But yeah, that's for me though. For other people, it might be like 120.
Oh yeah, I mean that's like not even my rent.
Yeah, but I guarantee if this is the thing, like this is the thing people don't understand about you. If someone took like 80% of your money, I guarantee it would be extremely painful. But on the other side of that, you'd probably just be doing the same thing.
Yeah.
You might be like slightly more pragmatic about trying to make money from the things you're doing, but I guarantee you'd be doing pretty much the same thing.
I thank you for saying that. I definitely, I believe that. And and I know that I have a spouse. I mean, that's like, we haven't talked about Angie, your spouse.
Yeah.
I have a spouse that believes
that. Keep doing this.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So, well, Paul, man, this was awesome. I'm so proud of having you as our first and repeat guest. I'm proud of the second book that you have out there. We'll put it all in the description in the show notes, but where can people go buy the books, subscribe to the things?
Yeah, so my book website is pmillard.com/goodwork, and my other books are linked from there as well. So yeah, pmillard.com. I don't have all my stuff linked there, but I'll get around to updating it eventually. And yeah, always happy to gift it to people if they want to give it away to friends, and reach out. I love hearing people's stories.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Paul.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Khe. And I'm glad you fired your CEO.